Welcome to Plugged In, a podcast by OREMC about our co-op, our community, and our shared connections. I'm Michelle Hutchins, your Director of Communications and Marketing. Joining me today is Lucie Akkermans with the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra. Welcome, Lucie.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for being here today. Okefenokee REMC became familiar with the orchestra relative to our foundation. The foundation had received a couple of grant requests to support the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra String On program and New Instruments program, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a bit. But that's kind of the connection between our co-op and the orchestra. So let me back up a little bit. It's my understanding that the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra has its roots in the Coastal Symphony Orchestra. They were the youth orchestra, or youth symphony, originally tied to that back in about 2005. And then for a variety of reasons, they broke off, and the orchestra as we know it today, Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, was established in 2014. And that's when I think it is Maestro Haza was conductor. And now, of course, today it's Maestro Jorge Pena, correct? Do I have all this correct? Yes. And one of the big reasons for the formation of the orchestra to begin with was to fill in the gaps where schools were no longer providing music in schools. And so this was an opportunity, it was viewed as an opportunity to introduce students to music and get them involved, get them playing, and give them an outlet that they weren't getting anywhere else.
Right.
All that is accurate.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about you and your involvement in the orchestra. You had a violin put in your hand for the first time when you were 8 years old, and you went to primary school in Wales. So you have a whole different perspective of schooling and music in schools than we do here, largely in the U.S., but particularly here in the Golden Isles. You want to talk to us a little bit about that experience and how that influences your involvement and enthusiasm for what you do today?
Sure. Yes, so I grew up, I'm part Dutch, part British, but did most of my primary education in the UK. And there's a great line in the Welsh national anthem, and I will say it in Welsh. It goes, Gwlad Beirdd a Chantorion, which means land of poets and singers. And they really put a high value on the performing arts. And so there was just a lot of public funding for music in schools, including private music lessons. And at the age of 8, we were put in a room and given what they called a musical aptitude test. And so if you passed that, you were permitted to receive essentially free individual lessons on the instrument of your choice. And the teacher that provided that test for me, or for our school at the time, was a violinist. And when I heard him, and he just brought his instrument out after the test and demonstrated it, and I immediately knew that I wanted to play the violin. So that was my sort of segue into playing. But all through school, all those lessons were provided, a weekly lesson for free, involvement in school orchestras, and then county-wide and sort of larger regional-wide, and then eventually for me, the National Youth Orchestra of Wales, were just opportunities that were there for the taking. And I don't think I realized exactly what privilege that was, and what I had in my hands when I came to the States. And one of the things I love about GIYO is that we offer strings in such a sort of a large measure. We have a big focus on string education. A lot of music focuses on band, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's all very valuable. But orchestral playing is something of an elite sort of experience for a lot of people. So, and not available readily for most students. So, Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, however, just provides such an amazing opportunity at very low or no cost to our participants for people to be involved, for students to be involved, and for them to have the opportunity to play orchestral music and to have a stringed instrument put in their hands the way I had it put in my hands is something that I can really get behind, because my life has been so impacted for the better for having had those experiences as a child.
So I mentioned at the opening of this that one of the biggest reasons, and you've talked about it just now, about the formation of the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, was to address something that wasn't in the schools. And I think there were only 2 middle schools as it was that had student orchestras. And I think we've just learned recently that Glen Middle doesn't have enough orchestra students for 7th and 8th grade this year. So that's, sort of a loss, obviously. Now there's hope that there's a much bigger 6th grade class, but still, and a lot of this comes from COVID. But there had also been challenges. I know, initially a lot of the focus over the years has been in Glenn County, but we have definitely expanded. We've got musicians that come from McIntosh, is that correct?
I can't say for sure.
Okay, but then you also have musicians, and you've worked very hard to expand into Camden County, correct?
That is correct, yes. But for me, what's exciting is trying to rebirth and reintroduce the strings down there. And parents have been really receptive. We had one school that was very on board with us last year, Sugar Mill Elementary. And the principal, Terry Slattery, was very behind our program. And we did because they don't have a music program, there wasn't a designated space to introduce our string on program. So in lieu of that, we did an assembly, and we brought in a Coastal Symphony of Georgia. Did I say that right?
I believe so. There is the Coastal Symphony of Georgia.
Yes, player. Her name is Caitlin Smedley. She's a wonderful player and very engaging with the students. And she and I sort of tag team together on presenting, played some music for them. She's also a violinist, so we did some duets together. And then had offered an instrument petting zoo, which is where we just laid out sort of not enough, actually. We learned it wasn't quite enough. But we laid out a number of instruments for the students to go around and hold and try and play. And out of I think a class size of approximately 100 students, we ended up with 20 who wanted to take a class. We call that a pod. And so I think that's fabulous, and the parents were very behind it because we don't have music education in Camden County in the elementary schools. So for them, they were jumping at the opportunity to have their kids in something that provided them music. So yeah, I hope to expand it further. It's not a slow process, but
Sure.
One school at a time, and hopefully reputation builds and more people will want to be on board. And I'd love to bring it up into the middle school level and maybe the high school level, but it's
one step at a time.
One step at a time. Yeah.
Well, and we're going to get into the structure of GIYO, which is sort of the short version of Golden Isles Youth Orchestra. But to your point, I mean, yes, the focus has been on working with the schools in Glenn and now Camden counties, but any student who is interested and can inquire and particularly and potentially play with the training orchestra and then the Philharmonia, correct?
Very much correct. Yes, it's open to anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the structure. It's kind of a 3-part structure. It's the string-on program, which is how Okefenokee REMC Foundation was introduced to GIYO. There's the training orchestra or symphonette, and then there's a Philharmonia. Can you elaborate on each of those a little bit more?
Yes, and I'll actually add there's a fourth kind of area that we offer, and that is string lessons as well.
Yes.
So string on is a fairly new endeavor, as I understand it, and it's where we go into the schools and spend a week teaching 5th graders the basics of violin playing. So rather than going to their whatever they call them, specials, connections, their art, their computer science, or whatever it is that they're doing that particular day, rather than going to that class, each 5th grade class will rotate through and spend their time with me. We've got somebody else doing it this upcoming year, but I did the majority of them this last year.
Gotcha.
And then we put violins in their hands and we teach them how to hold it, teach them how to hold the bow. And by the end of the week, they're playing, Usually Mary Had a Little Lamb or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Row 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 Your Boat or something like that. You know, a simple little tune. And the hope is there to inspire them to continue in music in some way. And whether it's strings or whether it's another instrument, we're not particular about that, but it is, you know, it's one of the ways in which we're offering a connection between Golden Isles Youth Orchestra and the community.
So you referenced it slightly when you talked about the instrument petting zoo, if you will, down in Camden. And I'm wondering if there's the same sort of interest and enthusiasm that you see in String On. Talk a little bit about what you see in these fifth graders when they, you know, what is their initial thought when you walk into the classroom, and how has it changed by the time you're done at the end of the week?
Oh, it is a night and day change. So they come in and they're usually very polite, but a little reticent. And I think some of them just don't quite know what's going on. And by the end of the week, they feel so accomplished that they can perform the tune that they're doing. And usually we have one of our board members, she comes in, and she was previously a music teacher in the district and now retired. And she'll come in and she'll accompany on the piano. So I'll play the violin. We have her on the piano. Let me back up a little bit. On the Friday of the week, we always bring in a mentor musician, somebody from Coastal Symphony. It can be on any instrument, but their purpose is there to sort of demonstrate their instrument, talk about their life as a musician, take some questions from the group. And so I always tell the students, get ready, because we have a special musician coming in, but we're also going to perform for them. So we perform our little piece for them. And then, so the first time that they perform it, it's just purely to the guest musician. And then we usually bring everybody in. So Debbie will play the piano, the guest musician joins in, I join in. And if the music instructor is in the room, we've had somebody on guitar that joined in, and we create this mini orchestra out of the whole thing. And they love it, you know, and they want to repeat it as many times as we've got time for. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So I think, you know, we don't necessarily make string players out of all of them, but they all do enjoy that experience.
I think that's the magic of music, and the whole purpose for having the program to begin with is, you know, it's just introducing the kids to something they're not necessarily aware of, but could have a major impact on their life.
Yeah, definitely.
And I should also mention that the Coastal Symphony Orchestra's Musical Mentors Program is also a recipient of an OREMC Foundation grant. Yeah. So there's kind of a little trifecta going on.
There is,
so the support of both that brought, and the two of you have come together. So that's great. So that's String On. So what happens after that if there are students who are interested?
Well, we encourage them to take lessons if it's a stringed instrument they want to pursue. So we offer those during the semester at Glyn Academy every other Saturday, typically. And we hire instructors that are, you know, quality instructors. They get an hour-long lesson each time. They're also encouraged to join Sinfonet. Usually, I mean, we've got a very beginner group in Sinfonet at the moment. So it's traditionally been, you probably want a little bit of experience with lessons before you enter Sinfonet. But at the moment, it's so brand new and everybody's at sort of the same beginner level that they're ready to jump in right from the get-go.
And that's, again, tied back to COVID, is it not?
I think it does to some extent. The whole program took quite a knock during COVID, and we've seen numbers down. And
because kids weren't in school, and and even if they were, they weren't singing, they weren't playing their instruments, generally speaking, for a period of time.
Right. Yeah, and we could probably discuss many reasons why COVID, you know, had a negative impact on the program and many other programs. I don't think we're not alone. But Sinfonet is, it's a string-only orchestra.
Okay.
But students will, and I think that's provided largely because band opportunities exist for the winds and brass.
Yep.
But nothing exists for the strings. Not really. And we've got the 2 middle school programs, but one of them is suffering a little bit at the moment.
Like we discussed.
Right. So that would be the next step, and that would develop their skills even further. And there's a really different experience in playing by yourself and then playing as a group, you know, and you form all kinds of, well, friendships. There's all kinds of benefits, I should say, to playing together, you know, musically, the way you develop, community, sense of belonging somewhere. Some of the kids that we have, that's their home. Music is their home, you know, GIYO is their home. I mean, kids find their home in various ways, but why not something as constructive as, you know, as a orchestra? So that's Infonet. We have a new director that's coming on board this year, Dr. Knight. We're very excited about what she will bring, the experience, her expertise. So hopefully we can grow that program up to the numbers that we used to have. And then after that, it's Philharmonia. So there is an audition required because the rigor is just that little bit higher.
Of course.
And that is a full symphony orchestra. So we have winds, brass, percussion, and strings. And we perform all kinds of repertoire. And I know Maestro provides, I think, really robust and well-rounded programming for the students. And they get to experience what it is to play some of these really big pieces, you know, and these famous composers. And
well, having heard them play before, they are some very big pieces. Why don't we actually take a minute here, and I think we have a clip of one of their recent concert performances, and just take a listen. I think you'll be quite impressed. So obviously they sound amazing, for sure. Yeah. And you mentioned with the String On program the difference in the kids from the start of the week to the end of the week. Now I know that you got your master's in music therapy. So talk a little bit, if you will. We talk about the importance of music in education, and can you give some of those factoids that really point to the value of participating in music and what a difference it makes, not only in a person's individual development, but it's also, I believe, been proven to support academic development. Oh,
yeah, very much. And I'm afraid I don't have the stats in front of me, so I can't actually rattle any of those off. But, test scores improve. The left-right brain interaction is unique to musicians, the way that the brain is engaged. So, I mean, in all kinds of ways, developmentally, academically, socially, there is a huge benefit to being involved in a music program. I think somewhere in there, I want to say that the statistics do hold true, that most people in high positions have got music in their background somewhere.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I knew it was there.
Yeah, so I'm talking doctors, lawyers, people of that kind of caliber, I think all have it somewhere.
Sure. And I know from an education standpoint was one of the reasons the foundation trustees was so interested in providing a grant, because education is one of the backbone reasons the foundation exists to offer grants. And they very much, the trustees very much like to support those type of programs that kind of help underscore and support educational development in kids of all ages. We mentioned that GIYO is available to anybody who had an interest in, if it's Philharmonia, you'll have to audition. But earlier down the line, there's the lessons available. I think it's important to realize that the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra is fully funded by grants and individual donations from the community. And the whole impetus behind that is to help basically provide this opportunity to students, because many of the students, and I don't remember statistics because I did look at them, but something like, is it 75% of all GIYO musicians are on free or reduced lunch? And there's a large percentage of instruments that they borrow at no cost to participate. So it is truly an accessible program for anybody.
Much. Yes.
And I think it's probably also safe to say, because I think I have heard some stories where the students themselves are very passionate about the music, but it's not always understood maybe by those at home where the love of that's coming from. So when you say it's their home, you really do mean it in terms of fostering and promoting and growing them.
Yes, yes. To go back to your earlier point, though, I think one of the things that's really unique about Golden Isles Youth Orchestra is that it is so very well funded by donors, grants, and such, to the extent that it is very accessible for whomever. Most of the time, extracurricular activities for students involve a cost to the families, and it can become elite. You know, if you fall in the wrong income bracket, you're out of luck. And GIYO really does make it accessible for anybody. We have scholarships. I mean, the annual participation fee is next to nil for all the programs that we offer, but for those that are on free and reduced lunch, or we demonstrate they have other financial assistance, government assistance, they can participate for nothing, for free. And yes, we put instruments in their hands, stringed only, I have to emphasize, but a lot of people, schools can provide band instruments and things like that. So, but we definitely have a large demographic of people of students that participate that would otherwise not be able to.
Which makes the program even that more just a gem in our communities.
Yeah, really, really. I don't know that I know of another organization that's quite like this in that sense, locally.
Well, the students have various performances throughout the year. Now, as the Philharmonia being the auditioned higher level, typically high school musicians, they have 2 concerts a year.
They do have 2 concerts a year, but they also have their recital, which is typically late October, sometime in November, and that is a big fundraiser for us.
Right. So, but people can hear them at the concerts. But yes, the recital that you're referring to, it's typically at Forbes Farm.
It is.
And it's a ticketed event.
It is.
But it's important to realize, I think, that the money raised at that event, and we haven't even talked about this part of the program yet, totally supports summer camps for both the training orchestra and the Philharmonia. You want to talk about those summer camps? Yeah,
the summer camps are really great resources for students to come in. And I mean, we have a June camp, but I don't know why they don't have sort of more profound names, but it's the June camp and the July camp. But the June camp is basically the Sinfonet camp. So, and again, it's when I first started working with GIYO, that camp had the level was just a little bit higher. But it's gone through its sort of change, and we have a lot of younger beginner level students that actually were pulled in from the String On program this last summer. So June camp is a week long. It's day camp. The students come and they receive individual instruction. They have small ensemble time. There's large group performance as well. And then at the end of the week, we perform for a family that's able to attend a small concert. So, and we bring in instructors, and we have some of our high school Philharmonia students will usually go in and be sort of have a mentor role as well. And then the July camp is a much more involved week. So it's an overnight camp. We spend the week at Coastal College here in town. We draft in instructors from primarily Jacksonville Symphony Orchestra, so they're very high caliber. Sometimes I think our students don't know the feet of the people they sit at. You know, they
probably don't.
They don't realize who it is that they receive this instruction from. Very, very polished performers, you know, and so they receive individual instruction. There are ensembles that are formed during that week out of the instruments that we have, the people that we have. And then it's an opportunity for the students to kind of dip their toe into what the repertoire will be for the upcoming year. So
Gotcha.
there's a maestro will have that kind of ready. And actually one of the hats that I wear is as in the organization is librarian. So I'm responsible for making sure that that's all divvied out and the music is available for them. So and then at the end of the week, there's also a performance. We don't do any of the orchestral repertoire at that point. We just do the ensemble. But but that's a really important camp for our students, not just to prepare them for what's coming this year, but it's a really good opportunity for them to form bonds and relationships. And it fell out of my mouth one day. It's a little bit cheesy, but I said to the students during one of our announcements, I think, I said, you know, when we play well together, we play well together.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
One of the things I've done with Philharmonia this year is, as the manager, is to do breakouts once a month where we do games, just 10 or 15 minutes of a breakout. And it's designed to kind of break down some of the cliques or the walls that go up, you know,
Gotcha.
and get people to really know one another. And we don't all have to be best friends, but we do have to. It's advantageous to know one another and have a sense of, oh, yes, you're whatever their name is, and I know a little bit about you,
Sure.
you know.
Well, so those camps are amazing experiences, completely underwritten by the money raised from the fall recital. And that's, and I think I looked and saw comments similar to what you're saying that Maestro Pena has echoed, is that the community embrace and support of the Golden Isles Youth Orchestra is so important because it's not only a gem for the students who get the benefit of it, but just for community appreciation of arts and music and to see such young musicians performing at the level. So if you haven't ever taken in a performance, you want to be on the lookout for when those are. I think, like you said, Lucy, it's a ticketed event in November, for the recital. But then the concerts for fall and spring are at the Glen Academy Auditorium. They're typically about $5 a ticket. They're on a Sunday afternoon. So they're very accessible to everybody. And it's just, I remember the first time I heard the orchestra play, my neighbor invited me to go, and I was like, wow. Wow.
It is impressive.
It is quite impressive. Well, another point to make is not all of these students are going to go on to be professional musicians. That is not reasonable, A, and not where their interests lie, B. But there is a percentage of them that do want to continue to pursue music as a career, and many that even if they pursue a different career line, they still keep music close to their heart. Now, and I have to remember, I think I read that the orchestra has 11 or 14 alumni that are Redcoats, that are part of the UGA Redcoats band.
That might well be, yes.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about some of maybe examples of what some of the students that you've encountered over the last couple of years, some who may have gone on to musical careers and some who don't?
Yes, I think that you're right. Not everybody goes on and pursues a career in music, but that's not the point. Ultimately, I hope that most of them would at least retain an interest in music and maybe play in a community orchestra or a band or, for their own pleasure at home, whatever it is. This would be my third year managing Philharmonia, so I don't have the luxury of time in terms of knowing where students ended up.
Sure.
But I do work closely with somebody who was one of the founding students, not founding, but the original group when it was formed. Thomas, and he now works for Columbus Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an alumni. He comes back and he performs. He's an oboist, also a violinist, but primarily we kind of draft him in. If we have a lack in a certain wind instrument particularly, we'll invite somebody to come and fill that part for a concert. So Thomas is quite often our oboist. He'll come in and play that part. He's also very involved in the June camp, so we worked together this year, co-directing that camp. And so that's he's still got a very strong connection with the program years and years later. And then somebody else that I want to highlight, and he's got a soft spot in my heart, a tuba player. He graduated not this last May, but the previous one. And he went into the Marine Corps. Now I've got to get this all correct because there's a lot of words in here. He was offered a spot in the Naval School of Music, which I understand is actually really prestigious, not easy to get into. I know without divulging too much that his background, he was, from one of the less privileged areas in Brunswick. And really, I had a conversation with him one day, and he did mention that in his words, his intelligence and music are what he's using to climb out of that. And the fact that he was in band at school, so there was that part of his life too, but he was also in Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, and we can't underestimate the value of, what that experience has been to him and where it's put him now. And I just couldn't be more proud of him. We all are. I know when our board president saw this article about him, she was bursting at the seams as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it speaks to the motto, if you will, of Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, which is changing young lives through music. Yeah. I think what you've just described is that to a T.
Right.
And what the power of the organization and the power of music has to make a difference in the lives of young children, and as they grow up through the ranks and go through high school in helping support success.
Definitely.
Well, Lucie, if you don't have anything else to add, I thank you so much for chatting with us today and explaining what the GIYO, Golden Isles Youth Orchestra, is, and that it is available to anyone who might be interested. And we'll certainly make sure the web address gets put up on the screen so everybody can take a look at that. So thank you again.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, thank you for taking a watch or a listen, and we'll see you next time.